I have not done live stream in a minute on here, but we're on because the light's still okay, and give it a try. Just got some time with Pell. See where that goes. I have a few things out with me today, actually. I realize no one's in the chat yet, but I'm talking more for anybody else who comes to this later. Oh wait, someone's in the chat. Hello, Moon. I already have somebody in here. Look at that. Well, for the purposes of people who are coming into the stream later, i.e. watching it after it has finished going live, I have with me this evening my longsword, my rapier, my Meyer style rapier, and my Halberd, because I like halberds. I've got a bill hook, but I've been practicing a particular technique with this halberd, and I think one, my bill hook's too long for it, and two, my bill hook's kind of sharp, so if I mess up, I'm extra hurt. This one I only have to worry about the blunt trauma, not also the cutting. So that's why we practice with the blunt halberd. I wish this chat would stay up. Oh, thank you, Moon. Hello, William. Hello, Raul. Hello, Hidden Galaxy. Hello, Joe. Big halberd is a big halberd. It is within historical scale. So let's see. Boo, boo, boo. Yeah. So halberds can vary widely in their length, but a often rule of thumb is basically as high as you can reach. So really, I should be able to have a little bit more, honestly. But depending on what metric you're using, it's about this length. You know, you want something like as tall as the person can hold, and that gives you a really well-proportioned halberd for your individual needs. I keep having to come back because this chat does not stay up. Do I have a Beck to Corbin? No, technically. Yes, I do know the website Medieval Collectibles. I shop from there sometimes, or at least from like one of their sister sites. I think it's Dark Knight Armory, but I shop from them both. Hello, Peace Walker. So the specific thing I've been trying is Meyer's one-handed Unterhau. So an Unterhau is a cut from below. You can do it from either side. You can do it with a halberd. You can do it with a longsword, whatever you want. I'm switching hands with this, but you don't necessarily have to, because you could go 1, 2. You could throw them this way. You could do the same, right? I can come 1, 2. But the weird one is Meyer's one-handed Unterhau, which is why I've got this out today, because it's not sharp. Because in order to do this thing, you have to completely commit to the Unter, because you are whipping it with one hand at the back of it. And halberd's kind of heavy when you hold it from the back, because all that length is working against you. So in order to pull this off, you have to really commit. You have to get really high because it's long, and you have to really commit to that motion so that you can whip it under and through all with one hand. So if I can do this right, it looks something like that. But I'm still refining it because the way I end with it is way too exposed. So ideally, this comes, ideally you come through, accelerate, you get the hit, boom, and you bring it up above the head and you catch it again. And then you bring it down for a cut. I'm having a little bit of trouble getting it to hit where I want it to after I throw it. But you really can feel it working better if you start to really accelerate it before it leaves. Trying to accelerate it after it's already behind you, you need to be accelerating for that, but you really can help yourself out if you accelerate it a lot on that first motion here. That's where all of that momentum is coming. Where I get myself planted, I can hoo-ah with both arms, heave up, and come underneath. As far as aiming it goes, I'm not really sure. Are halberds light enough to spin them around like those flashy anime games with spears and staves? That's a good question, actually. Yes and no. So they are way more front heavy than those games tend to depict their polearms. So you can see how I'm holding it right now. Like, this thing is taller than I am, but the center of balance on it is right about there. So all that kind of like flashy twirly stuff tends to happen at the center of balance or just past it, which in this case leaves us with an extremely uneven polearm, right? So yeah, I can do it. Sure, I can twirl it, but I'm twirling all that haft and not much. Like, if you think about like twirling and trying to actually like hit something with this twirl, that's not going to happen. I can reach further than that halberd's extending. So that's kind of a pickle. Well, yeah, I mean, so a halberd will have all the weight at the end, just by factor of metal, dense metal, wood. I mean, the wood has weight to it, but you know, you're going to end up with a very front-heavy polearm. The counterbalance to that is your leverage rather than an actual counterbalance. So I can, by holding the, you know, with a nicely spaced grip, I can achieve a lot of control on that head despite the weight of it, and I can move it with a certain speed. Although I do find that, you know, the closer you get to that point of balance, the faster, of course, you can whip it. And then as I get, so yeah, so this is really choked up. And then this is a bit less choked up. And then this is really not choked up. It's a lot more work. So choosing where in the halberd you're holding it at any given point is kind of an important aspect to manipulating one of these. You don't really just take a grip. So, you know, like not even with longswords do you like really lock into a grip, but definitely not with a halberd. So if you notice in some of the sparring footage I have using my synthetic halberd, I'm switching, I'm sliding it through the lead hand a lot. So I might cast it out and then pull it back. Or, you know, I might swing and slip that lead hand as it comes out, but I will often return to a very spaced out grip, because that spaced out grip gives me a lot of control over the halberd, and then I can choose when I slip it out further. And then once it's been cast, pulling it back and withdrawing it. Yes, this is a halberd. What advantages would a poleaxe have over a halberd? Depends. Typically, a halberd has a hammer or maul on it somewhere, and a halberd does not. And a maul, by its design, is going to be better suited to dealing with armor than a hook and an axe blade. So in that respect, they tend to be a bit more optimized for armored fighting. The trade-off is that they also tend to, they collectively tend to be a little shorter than halberds, because the intention is different. Because with a poleaxe, you want something that's short enough that you can get up in somebody's face, and you can, it's short enough that you can still manipulate and move the person really well up close. Whereas longer polearms start to have a bit of a minimum range where you can't really get the business end online. Whereas with a poleaxe, even if you're really up in somebody's face, most of the time it's going to be of a length that you can still get the point in if you need to. Just reading the comments here. Oh, yeah. I'm reading Comrade Doggo's Good name. Comrade Doggo's comment about the halberd. Yeah, so if your haft screws together, that's no bueno. I would replace that with, it's going to be a pain in the butt, but I would replace that with a nice ash haft like this. This is ash. It's a really good wood for making hafts. It's very strong. So you're going to want to get a new haft, ideally like ash or something like that, and then you're going to remount the head onto that ash haft, and it should behave a lot better. Can you do a false edge cut with a halberd? Yeah, sort of. So the thing here is we only have one true cutting face. Now, depending on the kind of halberd you have, this might be just a spike, this might be sharp. So again, depending on the particular halberd, this might be something you can cut with. But if nothing else, you have the hook in the back. So there's a lot of debate about, or at least there used to be a lot of debate, I think, about whether or not that hook would ever be used for striking. And Meyer just straight up tells you to use both. So oftentimes, so the reason why he wants you to use both for striking is that he doesn't tend to want you to cross your hands, which you would necessarily have to do in order to get that edge on without switching your hands. You have two options there, right? You can either, so if I want to cut back around this way, I have two options. I can either cross my hands, I can cut one, I can cut two. Now my hands are crossed. Different disciplines, different reasonings. Sometimes crossing your hands are okay. With a halberd and the heft of a halberd's head, this is not a situation you generally want to find yourself in if you can help it. So rather than cutting cross-armed like that, he would sooner have you cut one, cut two, cut one, cut two. He just says, just come back with the back edge or the hook. You know, you hit somebody with that hook, it's going to ruin their day anyways. So that's where you get all of his drivings, all his cutting sequences with this are delivered 1, 2 like this. Back edge or lead edge, true edge, false edge, true edge, false edge, or in this case, axe, hook, axe, hook. And sometimes, yes, sometimes you'll switch hands. That's the other way you can do it, right? You could cut one, switch hands, cut two, switch hands, cut one, switch hands, cut two. But of course, this has its own issues, right? Because I have to make that transition happen. And with enough practice, this can become very fast. But it's still a transition. So by just eliminating as much of that crossed-armed or switching arms as possible, and just going 1, 2, 1, 2, it makes things simpler. Hello. Has there ever been a poleaxe with a blade on the bottom? Now, butt spikes are very common, and some of those can get a little spear tippish. I've never seen one with a dedicated like blade on the bottom though. I've not that I've seen. Not that it couldn't have happened, but I've not seen one. Hello, Finley. Yes. Double pointed is something is a different category. Let's like double pointed, completely valid, happens a lot, often recommended. Like my bill hook is not technically double pointed because it technically ends in something that's not sharp on the bottom, but it has this small little like ball cap at the end of a cone. And sure, it's not sharp, but it's this tiny little cone. And if you jab it in someone's face, it's gonna hurt. So it's principally there just to protect the bottom of the haft in my bill hook's case, but also it is a completely valid striking surface in and of itself. And sometimes they take that very seriously, and it is genuinely a striking surface, sharpened to a point. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, I'd rather have the spike too, especially if it's something where I am going to have it pointing at me, right? If I'm going to have the back end of my thing and at any point pointing towards me, uh, a spike is much more manageable because it's only going to be dangerous at the very tip. A blade is going to be, I don't really want to have a sharp edge moving around back here all that much. A spike I can deal with because usually my body's turned out, and a spike would just be going off in the distance. But anytime I'm making those transitions or sliding it, I'm like, I don't really want a live edge swinging that close to my body all that much. Yeah, again, that's part of why I really like the butt cap I have on my bill hook, because there's no way you're going to like stab yourself on it accidentally, but it is small enough at the tip that like if you drive it with force, it will become a weapon at that point. So it's a nice decorative butt cap, great for planting the polearm with, and then when you need to actually hit something with it, it will concentrate that force onto a small point. But you're not liable to stab yourself on it. If the shaft is wooden, can't they just cut through it? Yes and no. Different kinds of wood will provide different levels of resistance. Ash is really good at resisting being cut through. But yes, theoretically, you could eventually cut your way through, but it'd be very hard to deliver that blow to the haft in such a way that you would just cut it clean through. That's hard to do. You would definitely put some notches in it, but you also have to bear in mind that the halberds being held by somebody. And when you hit something that's being held by somebody, it tends to kind of go boom, right? It gets knocked away. So a lot of the time, you're not going to actually have that one-to-one transfer of energy. Something's going to be getting deflected or being set aside. If you're parrying, you generally want to be deflecting rather than just completely intercepting. There are a lot of mitigating factors that will help protect the wood haft. Plus, langets. Langets help too. You're not cutting through. This is not going to get cut through. All of this. I don't care how strongly they cut into the wood. It's going to hit the langets, and then nothing's going to happen. Yeah, there was a whole industry built around building hafts, just the hafts. You would think like it's something that you would always make on location or something, or they'd be made with the heads or whatever. But no, they're like dedicated industrial centers in a like medieval and Renaissance context, where all they do is they make hafts, and then they sell the hafts, and then you put whatever you want on the end of it. They're located in like dense forests, so like lots of lumber. But that's how seriously they would take the production of hafts. Do I think lightsabers have an edge like a blade? I've seen that theory bounce around. Yeah, I gotta like pop a squatter to get it back into frame. Do I think lightsabers have an edge? I've heard the theory. I think it's an interesting theory. I don't entirely subscribe to it myself. I think I don't think it necessarily matters, but it's an interesting idea. I won't buy into it too much until it's actually canonized. Da, 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 da. Can you cleave someone's leg with the hammer and yank them to the ground? Sure. I mean, if you've cleaved their leg, you probably wouldn't be yanking them anymore. You probably just cleaved the leg. But like, yeah, you could certainly like grab them with the hook and pull them. I think if you cleave them the leg, they're going down anyways because you just stuck an axe into their leg. I'm working my way through the chat here. Have I tried using glaive? I have used a glaive a little bit, not a whole lot. Okay. Okay, I think I more or less caught up with stuff. Yes, yeah, short halberds are totally 100% a thing. The halberds depicted in Meyer's effect book are about that tall. Yeah, mine's a bit tall compared to most of the ones in Meyer, which is part of the reason why I have trouble doing that Unterhau with it, because the halberds he's showing are not as long as mine. Not that it necessarily matters for most things. I'm wondering if I have a good picture. You know, that's not an overly long halberd there. I think having a sidearm, if you have a polearm, is a good idea just in general. I had all this set up so I could like swing it, or like I could do some like sword work, but I just ended up talking instead. Where do I stand on the efficacy of ball and chain type weapons and Cursa, blah, 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 blah. I think they have an interesting niche in like civic confrontations. A healthy bit of armor will neutralize them pretty well, I think. I don't like they're by their nature, I think they are very much like individual weapons that are well suited to like being hidden about the body, or defending yourself against multiple assailants by much in the same way like a Montante can, bitch clearing space around you. But a lot of its strengths are weaknesses in a more formation fighting context. Mhm. But I need to. I don't know if anyone here watches Instructor Bensei, but that guy is he has some beautiful rope dart and meteor hammer kind of work, and I would love an opportunity to workshop with him, because I don't really know all that much about them other than through osmosis. It's not something I've ever personally practiced. The sneaky thrust. I pulled that off finally for realsies. I pulled off the sneaky thrust in sparring one time. It was amazing. I was so happy. Which side? I think I did it on my left though. I don't think I did it on my right. I think I did. Yeah, I did it on my left. That felt right. Because the idea being that you've wound up for this big swing, boom, right? But instead you just go whoop. And it completely caught them off guard. It was great. Key. 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 Key, key, key. I've been working my class through key recently. Meyer's play with key. I need to do a video on it because somebody asked me to. So that's part of the reason why. That was a little self-serving. I mean, I had a genuine interest in it anyways. But I was like, you know what? Someone asked me about key, so let's work the class on key and see where we get with that. Try to work on my own understanding of it. Yes, I do. I do throw a false strike at a target just out of range to draw, or not necessarily just to draw a block, but to draw an attack. One that I like to do is to just cut all the way down into Halberd to bait someone out. So I might, I might come up into tag. So I might, let's say I'm trying to defense whatever, and I'll do this, and I'll even leave my head in a little bit as extra. I'll be like, "You want to hit this, right?" Just a smug little lean, just sell that I've like gone like, "Whoops, I've overdone it. What you gonna do? And importantly, being ready. Hey, Ma. Hey, Pa. Yeah, good idea to get how twitchy they are, yeah. Because if they spring after that, then you've got them, right? Just the one, they shoot at you, boom, you go up. Possibly like into like a Kronhau maybe. Or just 1, 2, kind of like that. Yeah, exactly. So just provoking. Oh no, I'm out of position. Whatever will happen, parry. Boom, done. It's great when they take the bait, but you have to be ready because you are deliberately putting yourself into a bad place. So that's my number one word of caution for anybody trying it. Is yes, it's very easy to provoke somebody into attacking you like that. The reason being, you're in a bad position. So you need to be very ready to get out of that position because you know that hit's coming. Is there an equivalent of Zverkow with one-handed swords? Yeah, Zverkow. It's the same. I have my one-handed sword because I don't feel like ruining my wrist today. Doing Zverkows with one hand, with a longsword, not fun. Yeah. Meyer doesn't do them with the rapier very much, but Zverkows with messers, yeah, that's something you see. You'll see like winds up, kind of like that. So let's pretend this is a messer. So you would perhaps cut in, you might wind up to try to get that thrust, and then so you'd wind up into a thumb grip, try to work that thrust in. If they press, Zver to the outside. Yeah, they do. So the thing with Zverhaus is, it's a lot of wrist. And the longer your sword is, the more out there it's going to be tugging on your hand or on your wrist as you do it. Okay, so the cut. I said it's a lot of wrist. I want to go ahead and catch myself before people take away the wrong idea there. I'm not saying you're powering the cut with your wrist. The power of the cut comes from the hips, but it's a lot of strain on the wrist. It's not so bad with a two-handed sword. With a two-handed sword, you have the ability to basically use the hands interacting. I can, they switch roles. So when I'm cutting to the right, the bottom hand is squeezing the acceleration. And when I'm cutting to the left, the lead hand is squeezing the acceleration. And so as that cut comes, and I want to arrest my momentum, I squeeze with the hand that isn't doing the initial acceleration. So if I'm cutting to my right, the back hand will start to squeeze and get that cut moving. And then if I want to stop, then my right hand squeezes and arrests momentum. So that's why it's so easy to do these with a two-handed sword, because you can just start, stop, and you have the other hand to serve as a brake. But if you're doing a one-handed sword, you don't have that other hand to do the braking. So if you whiff, it tends to just kind of like wrench. And you have to, it's not great. So having a shorter sword puts a little less strain. It makes it a lot easier to pull off those cuts because it's less work to stop the sword than with a longer sword. Yeah, definitely don't want to strain your wrist. Oh, thank you, Dylan. If you have any particular questions, I'd be happy to help. I'm quickly running out of light, but I'll be out here till the light runs out. So if you have any particular question, I can try to answer it. What is the most unconventional technique that I would be open to using? Interesting, interesting. I gotta think about that. Yeah, I think that more or less caught up on the questions. Let's see. Let me think about it. Unconventional moves. Oh, okay. So, I mean, I guess there is one. Is one that I've taken a liking to is the lifting up into a very dramatic raised foot position. It's really weird, and it doesn't turn up much in like anything else. But this really dramatic lifting of the foot, I've really enjoyed it, and I've actually had a fair bit of success using it because it's such a weird body motion to see on the receiving end. Once they get used to it, it doesn't work as well. But just like, you know, you're expecting somebody to sit here and fence at you, and then they go like this, and you're like, what's happening? It just something about just that. I think it's just such a large motion that it triggers this like whoa, hey, and then you roll off of that. Good evening. Yeah, definitely. It's really good for just messing with tempo. But again, you can't overuse it, right? If you over rely on it, eh. The one I never really get is just the stomping. The broken tempo from the raise I like. The people who just sit there and just go like and just kind of like stomp at you. I'm never phased by it. I get the purpose of the stomp. It's, you know, against somebody who's like really twitchy and jumpy, it's gonna make them kind of jolt. But if somebody stomps at me, I just kind of I just keep staring at them. The stomps never do anything to me. Yeah, yeah. It just kind of annoys me more than anything. I'm just like, it's loud. I'm just like, are we done? Are we done? Yeah, I guess the stomp does kind of, or the lift feels a little Karate Kid. It's fun too because Meyer says, or is this the same one that he says to squint? I think this is the same sort of lifting where Meyer says, this is not something we really can do with fencing masks on, but it's feinting with the face. He says there are two squinters. There's the squinter where you actually, it's the cut, the squinter, and then there's the squinter where you literally you squint. And so if you think about like, let's say I'm actually fighting you all, right? And I'm sitting there, and I'm fixated. Where's the camera? I got to do that camera. So I'm sitting there looking at the camera. So we're eye to eye, and then I go there, right? Like I start to fixate down because I'm looking at my target. I'm like, I want to hit that, or maybe I stare up and I don't look at my target, right? Using where I'm looking to misdirect my intention. So that's the squintery stuff. He's just like stare intently at something that you want them to think you're about to hit. Would Montante techniques still work without a long sword and a halberd? Ooh, that's a fun question. Yeah. So Montantes are cool because they occupy this really weird middle ground between a bunch of different things. Sorry, I feel like I need just like, you know, I do the same thing, Tom. When I'm fencing, I don't tend to fixate. I tend to just kind of like defocus and just kind of mentally occupy the middle, the center of the body, because tips are easy to lie with. You know, you can flick a tip around. Watching the tip never works. Watch the body. All right. So would Montante techniques still work with a longsword or halberd or glaive or naga? So yeah, I wanted to answer that one. I'm just reading the chat. So putting a pin on that one. Hutton in Cold Steel wrote that stomping much shunned upon and was considered lame. Having been stomped at, I totally get where he's coming from, because it just feels kind of petty. Like, okay. Again, I can see it working against someone who's like twitchy and inexperienced. They'll be like, cagey, but like anybody else, it's just kind of annoying. It's like, did you really think I was going to fall for that? Like, I'm insulted that you thought this would work on me. Okay, anyways. Back to the Montante. I don't have my Montante with me. It's in the house. I could go get it, but I don't feel like it. So let's pretend this is my Montante. So the thing about Montante is it's a sword. It's a big sword. It's generally balanced like a sword. So anything you can do with a Montante, you can do. I mean, even the kicking, I guess. You can theoretically do any of those motions with a longsword. The thing with doing it with a longsword is the longsword doesn't have the same mass, so certain things don't work as well. They can be done, but a longsword's not going to whip you around like a Montante will. All those dramatic spins where you come through, and I'm so close to hitting the target. I'm going to try one more time just for my own like. There it is. Yeah, all those big spins that make sense with the Montante can be done, technically speaking, with a longsword, but I don't recommend it. It doesn't have the mechanics. But barring those like big spinny spins, all your like kind of stuff, right? Let me think here. Yeah, all of these kind of like cut, thrust, cut, thrust, or whatever. All those kind of motions, yeah, 100% you can translate them to a longsword. And honestly, not a bad way to go conceptually if you were trying to use a longsword against a bunch of people. You know, if you were outnumbered, yeah, big sweeps. If you were outnumbered, big sweeps are going to be your friend. Continuing, in much the same fashion, a halberd is a big, long, kind of heavy thing. So it's a little bit different because of the spacing of the hands. So, you know, I can't sit there and swing this around like it's a sword. But I can apply a lot of the same concepts of that Montante stuff. Although as I'm sitting here thinking, it translates less good. A longsword can basically just one-to-one adapt Montante stuff. You have to kind of futz it a little bit more with a halberd, just because of the hand position shenanigans complicate things a little bit. You know, because you don't want to, you do cross arms all the time with Montantes and stuff, and you don't really want to do that with the halberd. But you know, all the same principles of like working your momentum and striking 1, 2, 1, 2. I suppose you could even do a degree of spin work with it, maybe. Let me think. How would I do that? Oh, I don't like that though, because I can't cross my hands well. That's an interesting problem. Oh, yeah, maybe not. I'm gonna rethink that. I'm gonna rethink that part of my answer. But yeah, the longsword, sure. Is it possible to escape a hit if an opponent grabs your blade? Yeah. The number one is wrench it out of their hand. So the sword, it's possible to grab swords without getting cut. Definitely. There was something in the bush. It is entirely possible to grab a sword without getting cut. But the problem that happens is once you have grabbed a sword and it moves, you're getting cut. So if somebody grabs your sword, one of the first things you can try is just like get your body and just wrench. And if you can pull it out of their hand, if that had an edge, bye. That's stitches time. So that's one option. It can be hard to hold onto a sword if you really pull it. What is the best move you can do with a single-handed sword to gap close on a halberd? Yeah, I don't entirely know. So I'm still tinkering. I have not found any particular solution that I really love. I would say closing on a halberd with a one-handed sword is really rough because it's rough doing it with two hands. Really rough with a one-handed sword. I've seen suggestions that you should just not even try to do it with the one hand. You should just go straight into some sort of half sword. And I've seen one with like a rapier where it's being held like this, and you're just bisecting your body, and you are warding to either side, and you're using your hands widely spread across the blade to ideally catch and sweep, and use that as your way to get in with strength. And then once you're in, point. My light is quickly fading. Let's see here. I'm the sword and then let go as they pull. I'm the sword and then let go as they pull. Yeah, I mean, you could let go. I think sure. I'm thinking about it. Ripcording. I think at that point, like there are so many ways it can go either way for either party. It's trying to chew through all the possible permutations. I'm not entirely sure how productive it. Like there are so many. Like in that moment, I think there are so many ways in which it could play out. I think so like that circular logic of like, well, I can counter this with this, but I can counter that with that, and I can counter that with this, and you just go around in circles. How do you practice and deal with the impact you would inevitably get from strikes against the opponent? So I'm trying to think through. I'm trying to think through what you're asking. So like, are you saying like, how do you deal with the the force feedback? Like I've hit the thing, the force transfer like to my hands. Is that what you're asking? Like, how do you not like ruin your hands from hitting things? And if that's your question, then my answer is loosey goosey, not over gripping. So if you start like white knuckle gripping your swords, you are going to get a lot of strain on the hands. And one of the tricks is just learning how to keep a firm grip, but not a tight grip, and knowing when to loosen up too. So when I'm fencing, my grip is often quite relaxed. I'm not squeezing very often. I'll squeeze to cut, I'll squeeze to displace, but any other time, my hands are fairly relaxed. And it's about knowing when you need to tighten up and just get that little squeeze and then relax again, versus just being like, grrr, like that, because that's going to hurt you over time. Oh, it's getting really dark. I should wrap things up here because the only light I really have is the lamp up there. And it's been about 40 minutes. So, yeah, I'm going to try to wrap things up. I'm going to take a couple last questions here. I found myself thinking about the historical longsword combat on the battlefield, wondering how they're able to just do that, given the other soldiers around them. I'm guessing you're talking about like cutting like these kind of zwares and stuff. Ultimately, if you are like packed in with a formation, you don't have room for all this. There's not room for that. If sword fighting is basically just like it's really tight. You don't have room for all the fancy like woo stuff. It's oh, defend, boom, boom, all that tight stuff. And that's assuming you're even like fighting with the longsword and cutting with it. It might just be like thrust, 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 depending on the amount of armor they have. There might not be any point to cutting at them at all. So you might just be thrusting at them. I started back in college. It's been almost a decade. How long does it take to get your level of proficiency? I have no idea. I think everybody progresses at their own rates. Some people take to it really well. Some people have more legwork to do. Some people come from martial arts backgrounds where they already have experience. They pick it up really quickly. People from sport fencing backgrounds pick it up very quickly. People who have not done much don't tend to pick it up as quickly. So there are a lot of factors. You know, how often are you training? All that kind of stuff. It's hard to put a timeline there. Oh, okay. So how do you... I think this might be a good last little topic to end on. I'm just checking one last time for any other topics I want to hit here first. How do you compensate in your technique? A lot of what you demonstrate is so fluid, but you will hopefully make a strike. So how do you strike and get back into your movements? I also can't parry forever. Oh, there was a lot of comments. Okay. When facing someone who is more defensive and purrs, waiting for you to move for a counter, and is very good at detecting feints, how would you approach them? Oh, that's a good one. I had a fight like that actually in my last tournament. Okay, I think we have the two we have the two things. Okay, this is what we're going to end on because I am really out of light now for realsies this time. I'm majorly out of light, so I don't even know how much of this is going to show, but hopefully I can talk through it and we can get somewhere with that. So, how do you recover if we've like I'm always doing all the smooth flowing stuff? You know, how do we recover if we get interrupted? One being you might get hit, or you might take a parry, and it might rebound you, and you flow. So if you have struck something and you get knocked off, learning how to take that beat and turn it into your next cut. Or if maybe you're in a bind and you start to work the thrust in, and they push you, boom, hit. Maybe you've struck through and you need to transform into something else. You can do some like push pull to whip the sword back. Maybe I've cut and I want to go to somewhere else. I might push with the backhand to snap the sword back, and then I can come back through a different way. Or if I want to be really sneaky, I'll cut one way and then I'll just cut right back to the same spot I did. I'll cut, pull off like I'm about to cut again, but I never even get there. As soon as they see me coming off, they instantly assume I'm going to cut to the other side. But all I do is I cut off, and I cut right back again. And then someone was asking, how do you try to open somebody up who's very defensive, who's only ever like receptive, and they're really good at countering you, and they don't fall for feints? One option is you wait them out. See who's more patient is always an option. They will probably be more patient than you, but it's worth trying at least. Just if they don't want to attack, you don't attack. They don't want to attack, you don't attack. You just wait. You can try for some like shallow targets. See if you can, just get some like really little things in maybe. Defending the hands against somebody who's being very feinty towards the hands is hard. Even if they're really good at countering, it can be hard to keep those hands covered. If you keep throwing like up and unders at their hands, one of those will probably get through. Defending for long against the point is hard. So trying to just start to aggress them with the point, but don't commit to the thrust yet until you get them tracking. And once you get them tracking, then you launch your thrust. You can also just, pressure with distance. So if they just really want to countercut something that you give them, just get close to them and don't give them anything. So rather than trying to open them up from like with a passing step on a cut, rather than that, try just get closer and see what they do. They might start to get panicky by you just being so close, and that your proximity to them might trigger them to launch something that you can then counter yourself. Or you might be able to creep into a distance where you can then initiate before they can react. Because it's a lot harder to read a thrust from here as opposed to back here. Distance is time. So you can creep in on them because they're not doing anything to stop you. Creep in and then initiate and see if that works. All right, anyways, I'm gonna wrap it up there because it's super dark out and I don't think anybody can see anything anyways. So thanks for joining me, and I will do this again sometime. Hopefully I think YouTube messaged me and said that they are rolling out new mobile support for streaming. So I'm going to see if that gets implemented, which hopefully will make it easier for me to live stream, because this is a really bad format for what I'm doing, because your text chat is like down here and super tiny. So I have to keep coming up here to read it. I need something bigger so I can read it from back there. Anyways, have a good night.